chose falsehood as falsehood, and grant us the ability to abstain from it. Ameen thumma ameen. And so as we continue to venture the life of Fatimah alayhi salam, and our Imam alayhi salam as well, Imam Ali alayhi salam as well. So let me add the following prayers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this easy for us. Ameen. Unite us all in true Islam. Keep us moderate and focused on Him and His Messenger. May He assist us in addressing any injustices, and may He protect us from being twisted, from trauma. May He accept our efforts and heal us, forgive any mistakes that we make, and lead us all to better. Ameen. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all people of Quran, Sunnah, and with the reconciliation to Ahlul Bayt in the manner that pleases Him best. Ameen thumma ameen. And again, Allah knows best, and what do we know? We know nothing in comparison.
Ameen, summa ameen. Now, during the course of the past few weeks, what we've done is, Sister Lillah, you've very methodically taken us through the birth and the timeline of Lady Fatimah alayhi salam, and we started off the element of Fatimah with the discussion coming of age. Then we found more details, and we cultivated a lot more appreciation for early life as we addressed the topic blossoming youth. Thereafter, we looked at the theme of commitment, and you entitled that particular segment Duration of a Flame. Then it was about cultivating a lasting marriage that will continue to grow in the gardens of eternity. And so on that note, what you did is essentially set the foundation for us to meet and greet a partner, the equal to Fatimah alayhi salam. And today you are entitling today's particular segment, Holding the Frontline, and still holding on, Sister Lillah.
Still holding on, because that was actually the last that was the last title that we were doing. And so that was the last, not the last Wednesday, but the Wednesday before and then when my voice went, and then I did a Hifz class the next day, but then obviously I had to just listen, and I couldn't like actively join in the class. So she started the lesson again with an inspirational khutbah, and mentioned the Muqarrabun, which means those that draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she continued that every difficulty is an opportunity to draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we will be tested. So, it kind of gave me closure, because I was actually feeling a little embarrassed, like, oh, but why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, I'm doing this for you. Like, surely you would help me. And, but the thing is that ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one who created the very concepts of success and victory. But part of that journey is overcoming hurdles and perseverance. So, we've been speaking a lot about commitment lately up until that point. And so, of course, look at what gets tested. And I remembered, feeling a little bit, set back and defeated. But I remembered Zainab alayhi salam after Karbala, when she was confronted about the death of her beloved brother, when Ibn Zayd tried to mock her with, praise be to, quote, praise be to Allah who disgraced you and revealed your sayings as false. In that he was suggesting that their defeat was part of failure, and that it indicates an inferior position in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to which she replied, I saw nothing but beauty, and so forth, because she could see the other dimension of existence that isn't measured by superficial results, but the greater aspect of the hereafter. And in one statement, she shows us that she's clearly her father's daughter, not only in the literal meaning of her name, Zainab, beauty of her father, but also in reflecting the lofty and higher qualities of his countenance and his perception that extends beyond the apparent. So this is also relevant if you consider our previous discussions on the intention towards committed contracts and striving to have long-term, Allah-pleasing relationships that fit into the eternal goal. So, and speaking further on commitment and perseverance, we can look again to another great personified example of this, which is, Imam Ali alayhi salam. So, what I discovered, alhamdulillah, that my voice did break and crack the way that it did, because we were discussing the birth of Ali ibn Talib, and how many, like both Shia and Sunni scholars, or some, I would say both Shia and some Sunni, believe that his mother went through an opening in the Kaaba to give birth. So there was a crack in my voice after talking about the crack in the Kaaba. Others argue that the crack was there due to an army attack, which just happens to be the army of Yazid, when they besieged Mecca in 683, and Yazid was very clear and obvious enemy of Ahlul Bayt. So he bombarded the city with catapults. The Kaaba caught on fire during the siege, which also resulted in the black stone splitting apparently. So the significance of that is it's much like how if you're sitting in your room and you see this crack on the wall, and there's something very intriguing about that brings up a lot of questions. that corner has a very intriguing quality as well. And people say that it was damaged due to the catapults and the fires that Yazid assaulted it with, but then we would see more of it apparently. So it was struck in more than one spot, if that was the case. And we know that it had to be rebuilt after the end of the second fitna, and this all happened after the events of Karbala. So others said it was due to weather issues. And again, we would find it all over the Kaaba, not just that one specific spot. Especially, we would find it on the top, not at the bottom corner. And what's so interesting, and this is what I found out further after going back, because I would have just moved on from that subject, but it's the Yemeni corner. That's what's interesting, is that it's facing Yemen, which makes me think of the many hadith from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ about Yemen. Like, for example, the best of men are the men of Yemen. Belief is Yemeni, and I am Yemeni. The people of Yemen are on the verge of ascending upon you as they are clouds. They are the best of people on earth, and the most beautiful pilgrims are the people of Yemen. So I found all of these from Islamic NGO sites, because they're coming up a lot, raising funds for the people of Yemen who have suffered famine and various inflictions because of war, which also raises questions, much like the crack in the wall, symbolically, about who is responsible for their suffering, and opens up other issues relating to the airstrikes, the same people who are the guardians of the Kaaba now, what is their involvement. But, we just keep quiet and keep breaking off, bits of our sponsorship for Yemen here and there. You understand? So, had it not been for the crack in my voice, then I wouldn't have gone back to review the crack in the Kaaba. And besides then finding that it is the Yemeni corner, it also came up that Yemen just happens to be the same place that the Army of the Elephant came from. And what's significant about that is that, well, there's two things. The father of Ali, alayhi salam, Abu Talib, who shows strong signs of Hanafi and monotheist inclinations, was very central to that situation. When the army of the elephant from Yemen came towards the Kaaba, he was the custodian alongside the father of Khadija alayhi salam, and thus grandfather of Fatima. So you see there's that beautiful symmetry, everything coming together. So that would be the grandfather of Fatima alayhi salam, and regarding the area, and they saw themselves as part of that legacy of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So, and then these men were on the front line of that situation. And the significant thing, aspect number two, is of course the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was born in the same year, the year of the elephant. So Abu Talib later did the nikah for the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Khadija. See, again, becoming together, Khadija alayhi salam, and fosters the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ along with his wife. And then when the Prophet ﷺ fosters Ali alayhi salam, also the youngest of four boys. So again, there's a symmetry. While Fatima, Fatima alayhi salam, she's the youngest of the four girls, whether they're adopted or biological. Either way, she's the youngest of the four females. So there's all the symmetry of these events, all these patterns that overlap and reflect each other. So getting back to Sheikh Suleiman from the Sunni camp, he claims that the sons of Abu Talib were born a decade apart, and said that the mother of Ali alayhi salam and the wife of Abu Talib was so special that although he considered doing a lecture on her, that it would have taken too long, because she was the first as well. She was the first Hashimi woman to accept Islam from the tribe of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and some scholars put her in the first 10. So she immediately believed in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and like Ayman, she was someone who was like an additional foster mother to the Prophet, and raised him from the ages of 6 to 25, just before he got married to Khadija alayhi salam. So Fatima bint Asad, she looked after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and made sure that he had food, sacrificed her own food, despite having so many children and while struck with poverty. And she was a real mother figure after he was orphaned, and she also suffered the boycott with them that caused the death of her husband, Abu Talib, and of course her foster son's wife, Khadija. Again, that symmetry. It's all coming together. So according to the Sunni scholar Sheikh Suleiman, Muhammad ﷺ would call Abu Talib his father, and Abu Talib called him his son, and he was known as the orphan of Abu Talib. Now Dr. Naqshwani from the Shia camp as to that saying that if the person who takes care of an orphan is so close to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, then how close is Abu Talib? Given that he took care of not just an orphan, but someone like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him himself. So both scholars agree that the Prophet ﷺ came to the home of Fatima bint Asad, the mother of Ali, alayhi salam, when she passed away, and he wrapped her in his own shirt or robe before burying her, and she was watching him making dua for her while she was making that transition. So both scholars agree that he cleared the grave, made special attention, and he led her janazah. And Dr. Naqshbandi adds that though that the Prophet Muhammad instructed her what to say to the angels of death by saying Allah when asked who she worshipped, the Prophet Muhammad when asked who her messenger was, and her son when asked who her wali was. So both scholars agree that she narrated 46 hadith narrated through her children. So how old were all the sons of Abu Talib and Fatima bint Asad? According to Ibn Hajar, Ali alayhi salam was born 10 years before the Prophet Muhammad received revelation, so now it's math time. If the Prophet Muhammad was 40 years old when he received revelation, then he was 30 years old when Ali alayhi salam was born. Okay, so since the sons of Abu Talib were born 10 years apart, then we have Talib, the oldest, born the same year as the Prophet Muhammad and so was the same age. The next brother was Aqil, who would have been 20 when Ali alayhi salam was born, and then Jafar, who looked similar to the Prophet Muhammad and he would have been 10 when the youngest Ali alayhi salam was born. So it's like, I'm assuming it's probably roughly 10 years. It might not have been necessarily been exactly 10 years. And now getting back to the Kaaba, Dr. Naqshbandi, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his surname right, mentions the belief that Ali alayhi salam was born in the Kaaba. And I've heard this before from the Sunni camp. In fact, it was the very same lecture by Sulaiman who mentions it, but then also brings up another individual, the nephew of Khadija alayhi salam, who was allegedly born in there as well, but he mentions this more to validate than to dismiss the claim, and then looks down as if unsure. But I didn't realize that they meant like literally inside the Kaaba, not near it, you know. So there were idols around it, and some anti-Shia Sunni, some anti-Shia scholars would argue that there were idols in it. But so like, then how can he be born inside? But then they would need to explain how the Prophet Muhammad was facing the Kaaba in prostration, if that were true, or if that were intended hindrance, given that Fatima bint Asad was of noble Abrahamic and Hanafi lineage like her husband, dating back to the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So it was mentioned that she was doing tawaf while pregnant and then went into labor, so made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of Ibrahim alayhi salam, until the walls opened to allow her in, and people saw this and tried to bang the walls open, but then none could get through until 3 days later she came out with a baby and was sustained by fruits from Jannah. And I must admit that if you Google crack in the Kaaba, the images of the corner are very interesting. So they say that it opens every year on the 13th of Rajab, which is the birthday of Ali alayhi salam, Allahu alam. So it's a good time to go on Umrah to see if that happens, inshallah. So I repeat that, look, I'm repeating this claim about the crack due to the other issues like the weather battles from the enemies of Ahl Bayt. But again, the main reason I'm bringing this up is because according to the Shia and some Sunni, that this is where Ali was born, thus his mother received the instruction to name him that as an inspiration, because it is a fraction of the name that's pulled and extracted from the title of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But according to Sheikh Sulaiman, she wanted to call her son Asad, and his father came back from a trip and didn't like the name, so changed it to Ali, meaning noble character, according to his khutbah. And there's a way to test this. So I looked up who was called Ali before Ali, and I couldn't find any other companion or anyone else with that name. So it could be a coincidence that Abu Talib decided on a whim to give his son a name relating to a noble character that he had yet to see develop in his infant son, or it could be much like the name Yahya or Isa, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen a name, then often it's the first time it's given, and the parents are less likely to think of a name that has yet to be mentioned. So you see how that makes sense?
It does. It does. And I'm Googling this as you're speaking, and it does say all of this.
Yeah.
That, yes, for some, it's quite contested, it seems, this idea of the crack in the Kaaba. And then it still opens up after the Kaaba was demolished by the Bani Umayyah. And that there's even a particular scent that comes from there. That's not evident in any other space or any other part of the Kaaba. Highly contested, yes, certainly.
Yeah, and so like the thing is about the name is that that's circumstantial, but it's something to be considered. So, but regardless, Sheikh Sulaiman claims that her intention to call him Asad, if that was the case, was later realized when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ called him the Lion of Allah, Asadu Allah, because of the way he carried himself on the battlefield.
Yeah. But I think what all of this just really speaks to is the absolute significance of Imam Ali alayhi salam within the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course, I mean, we are discussing him in relation to Fatima alayhi salam. But of course, as we know, and as you've laid the foundation so well, the importance and the significance that, or the significant role and the integral part she was, you know, to the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah. So we're going to go back again in time before moving forward again. Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was born and then orphaned at the age of 6.
Yeah.
Okay. He apparently gravitated towards Abu Talib, who became his foster father from ages 6, and then at 25 he gets married to Khadija alayhi salam. This means 5 years later Ali alayhi salam was born, but then soon after that a famine hits the community and affects poorer families especially. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who's not yet the Prophet and in a better position because he married the wealthy merchant woman and working with her, goes to his other uncle Abbas and says to him that his uncle Abu Talib was struggling and suggested that they help him. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the brother Abbas, or his uncle Abbas, offered to take the two of the children while Abu Talib kept Aqil. And I'm assuming that the oldest was obviously old enough to take care of himself. So Abbas took Jafar, who was about a decade older, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his wife Khadija alayhi salam, they took, I'm saying quote, baby Ali alayhi salam, and a quote miracle was pointed out by Sulaiman that Khadija alayhi salam could have breastfed Ali because she had milk due to other children, but then he would not have been able to marry Fatima alayhi salam. It would have been natural of that time. The question was put forth then why the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't adopt him the way he adopted Zayd. But Ali alayhi salam wasn't an orphan, but just needed fostering. And it's understandable that he was seen as a type of brother, given that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was raised by his father, the father of Ali alayhi salam, and then raises him in return. So it's a very interwoven situation, creating this bond of brotherhood and connection, subhanallah. But I looked up that Ali alayhi salam was only 5 years old when he moved in with them, so there wouldn't have been need for breastfeeding anyway, because he would have been old enough. Yeah.
Again, we're still at that age, and already so many contested points that have come up. So Shukran explaining all of those. You are listening to Sister Lillah. We are presently in our segment on matters relating to social justice, and of course, we're continuing our series with Sister Lillah, continuing in the direction or moving in the direction of Allah through the best of women. Do stay tuned to Community